தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் TVI.
Welcome to CrossRoads on TVI, a show that showcases the Tamil Canadian community, our successes, and our issues. We're going to have a really interesting show today. First of all, we'd like to wish all of our Muslim viewers Eid Mubarak. Today on our show, we'll meet a group called the Charity Ball for Hope and speak, perhaps even debate with a panel about the Olympics. Let's get started. Our next guests, Vaithaki Kumar and Kuhan Paramsodi, are two of the founders of the Charity Ball for Hope, a non-profit organization supporting projects in Sri Lanka for disadvantaged children, youth, and women in regions impacted by poverty, conflict, or natural disaster. They're here to talk about the importance of education in these areas that they work in. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Angela.
It's my pleasure. It's a very interesting initiative. First of all, let's get this off the bat. There was a tremendous buzz about you guys last year. Just about the event that you had and everyone saying, oh, it was sold out a month early and all of that. And it seems like there's a lot of buzz about you guys this year too. And I'm curious, I mean, how did this initiative start? You're a software entrepreneur, a software engineer. You're in land surveying. I mean,
Yes.
you're professionals, and this is a volunteer commitment for you. So how did this initiative start?
So a bunch of us, we got together over dinner and we're discussing about issues in the north and the east in Sri Lanka. And over the course of the night, a lot of stories came up about the disadvantaged communities in those areas. And just some examples of some stories that really hit home with us was about a child no older than 10 that was taking care of his younger brother just because there's no other living relatives around. Another example that really struck out was there was this group of widowed mothers who had dug their own well in order to be able to get fresh water. So these stories are all too common in those areas, and we felt as a group that we wanted to be able to do something. So we started the Charity Ball for Hope, which holds an annual gala. The proceeds from that go towards being able to fund grassroots projects in the north and the east, and we hope that through this effort we'll be able to improve the quality of life in those areas and perhaps inspire others to do so as well.
Okay, so it's interesting. I get the clear idea that you are a set of volunteers that are raising money for sort of established organizations down there, like small grassroots organizations that are doing the work.
Yes.
That's interesting. Okay, so I mean, I've met some of your volunteers. I mean, a lot of them are actually hanging out in our lobby, and it seems like a really passionate group. So, why are you personally involved?
Well, to hear these stories about what's going on in the north and east parts of Sri Lanka, and yet they're so resilient, and it's their resilience really that got us inspired to do this. And when we were having that dinner conversation, I was like, there's more people like myself who want to help. So we all decided, you know what, let's as a group start something.
So, I mean, you've done a couple of projects last year. I'm curious, what are you, where is the money going this year? What are the projects you're focusing on this year?
So the Charity Ball for Hope focuses on women and children in the areas of health, education, and livelihood.
Okay.
So we have several projects this year. Two examples are an after-school program in Bani and Jaffna, as well as a mental health facility in Jaffna. The after-school program in particular it's been very successful and has had a huge amount of traction. We have 150 students in the Bani region alone, and 20 students have actually graduated and gone on to university.
Nice. That must have been,
It is.
considering that you had that dinner before and you wanted to make a difference, that must have been nice for you
It
to hear.
was.
Now, I caught something that you just said actually made me think. You were talking about mental health, and I also read on your website that of the story that was very sad, that there are mental health patients, people that are suffering from mental illness that are being abandoned sometimes. This is happening both in the north and the east of Sri Lanka, in like temples, or can you speak to that? I mean, that must be part of the reason that you chose the mental health project.
Well, this is our first year where we've decided to look into the mental health society and fund them, because there was some statistics that was said that there's one psychiatrist for every 100,000 people in that area, and about only 5% of the people that need the help are getting it. So we felt like, you know what, we need to do something. We need to start funding these people as well, just so that the women and the elderly have a place to go. And families suffering from so much, such as like the poverty and the tsunami and the war and stuff, it's just so much for them to handle and deal with family members who have these mental disabilities. So we thought by supporting them, they'll be able to be monitored and taken care of properly.
That's a good point. I would imagine that if you're trying to figure out shelter, food, clothing, then if you have someone with mental illness in the family, perhaps they don't become the priority.
They're not, usually the case.
And you're hoping that the Tellipalay base hospital helps. The other thing that I also noted is that there is a really strong focus across the projects that I was reading your website, by the way. I spent a little too much time on your website. I noticed that there's a strong focus on education, and you actually have very strong feelings about investing in education. So I don't know, Kuhan, if you can expand on that. It seems obvious, but we'd love to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot that can get in the way of a good education in these disadvantaged communities. The students may be displaced many times. There may not be enough staff or infrastructure as well. Or the parents may have financial difficulties in being able to send their kids to school every day. So in the Charity Ball for Hope, we put a lot of emphasis on education because we feel that if we're able to support a kid reach his educational goals, he'll be able to support himself and his family and overall help uplift the community. So we see it as the means of being able to put in a small investment now and to be able to get a greater return later on.
That's inspiring, very inspiring. So tell us about, you have an event coming up, right? Actually, first of all, I think our viewers would like to know about last year, because that was your first ever event.
Yes.
How did that go?
Last year was our first year. We decided to hold an event to raise the money. There was a lot of attendees, lots of sponsors. We reached our goal and beyond. We did not anticipate any of that. There was a lot of people from the community that came out and showed us their support.
Sounds like you were actually somewhat surprised.
Yeah, because
it was your first year.
Yeah, it was our first year, and we were just kind of like, oh, let's lowball it a bit. And then when we saw so many people from our community, it was just shocking to us. And we raised so much money, which we decided to
it
put
ended up going towards the after-school program as well as to help pay for an ambulance in Batacolo.
So we were quite happy to see our community step up.
Why do you think, I'm curious, why do you think people embraced you so much?
I think they just believed in the projects that we were showing, and we spent a lot of time in choosing the ones that really seemed to fit within our mandate, and we thought that this would be a great opportunity, and I think it really resonated with the community.
And people perhaps, maybe they were doing the same thing. They were having dinners and felt like they had to do something,
Absolutely,
right? So tell us about what's happening on September the 15th.
That's right. Yeah, we're very excited. Things are going very well. Just like last year, the tickets are going to sell out well in advance. And we're so thankful for the corporate sponsors that we have this year, some of whom have joined actually now for the second year in a row. And we're thankful for all the attendees that are joining, and we're just very humbled by the amount of support that we've gotten from the community, both for the gala as well as the projects that this is for.
I'm just going to stop you for a second, because there was actually a reason that made us, CrossRoads, invite you to the show. There was a story about a young gentleman, a Tamil Canadian gentleman and his family, that perhaps you can share that, because that was partly the reason that we were...
Yeah, he was actually our youngest sponsor, we would like to call him, which was so heart-touching to us, and we were just so shocked to see this 3-year-old boy who celebrated his birthday and decided to donate his birthday money to us. So it just shows us that his parents teaches him the value of giving at such a young age, because he is really the future for us, right? So it's quite nice to see
Very
that.
touching story.
Yeah.
So where can people, where can people go if they're interested in either, finding out more about you guys, or?
So you can find out on our website, www.charityballforhope.org, or find us on Facebook at charityballforhope.org. I'm sorry, not .org, just for hope. So if you want volunteer opportunities or for sponsorship or even for ticket information, you can find us on there.
Are you guys an all-volunteer team?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are.
And more come on board as well during the event and near the event time. So it's quite nice to see. Yeah.
People, great. Well, thanks for providing the community with an opportunity to kind of work on something that we
Yes.
want to. I think people read these stories and they might actually need an outlet. You might actually be
Yes.
providing an outlet. That's interesting. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
and
you
good
very
luck.
much.
Yeah, and please keep us posted. I'm
We
sure
sure
that
will.
our viewers would like to know how this event on September the 15th,
15th, that's right.
goes.
I'm sure a lot
Well,
will
there you
show up
have
as
it.
well.
The
Great.
Charity Ball for Hope. Lovely people. You're watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. And now on to the Olympics. Let's meet the guests on our panel. By day, Subi Mahan is a seasoned IT project manager. By night, he's the vice president of the Toronto Tamil Sports and Entertainment Organization, which is the governing body for 3 very popular sports leagues: a basketball league, the TTBA, a softball league, and a beach volleyball league. Vijay Settler is a lecturer in sports marketing at Ryerson University and the Schulich School of Business at York. He is also a reporter with the Confederation of North, I may get this wrong, so you might have to...
It's very difficult.
Okay, the Confederation of North Central American and Caribbean Association Football. Is that good?
That's right.
Okay.
Perfect.
As a freelance journalist, he has reported for Sportsnet 590 and CBC Radio and has had the pleasure of covering the FIFA 2010 South Africa Cup. Shobhana Xavier is pursuing her PhD on religious diversity in North America at Wilfrid Laurier and Waterloo University. Her area of research is primarily Sufism in Sri Lanka and North America through diaspora, transnationalism, and immigration. She's been watching the reporting on the participation of Muslim women at the Olympics with much interest. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
What a panel. I think I'm exhausted just reading that. I should just walk off now, right, and let you guys continue. So you know what? I'm going to start off with the big question, which is, it might seem a little ridiculous to you, but I thought of this because I was watching all the stuff on space travel. And you know, when they had the landing, everyone kept asking this question about the landing. What is the benefit to humanity? So I'm going to ask you the same question. There's been a tremendous amount of money spent on the Olympics, billions by the host country, tons of people around the world watching it. So they've got all this power, they've got all this reach, all these resources spent on it. What does it achieve for humanity? What is the benefit to humanity? Why do it? Subi, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off. I think the main point is reaching, you know, the globe through sport and encouraging diversity through sport and keeping that context of competition and diversity and doing it all at the same time by being friendly and coming towards a common goal, right? Mm-hmm. which is having fun, winning, but also being being able to share your good stories, mm-hmm. right?
So maybe I'll get Vijay to take a stab, and then we'll come to you, Shobha.
I have to agree somewhat, but disagree in the sense that because the Olympics are every 4 years, it seems like the impact is getting somewhat diluted because the Olympics, they come frequently. Mm-hmm. And if you're talking about the Winter Olympics as well, every 2 years. I think the impact is felt more by the host country than it really is on a global macro scale, because each country is out to bid for the Olympics for their own personal selfish benefit, you can say, mm-hmm. whether it be economic development, whether it be to encourage a sport culture within the society. So I don't know if it really has that global impact that some people like to think it would have, mm-hmm. unless you're dealing with the situation, as Shobna will talk about in a second, with the Muslim athletes representing those countries for the first time. Mm-hmm. Then you get to a point where that specific Olympics was a turning point for a certain movement. Mm-hmm. But overall, it's an economic exercise that I don't think has a global impact except for on the host country.
That's an interesting view. We'll come back to that in a second as well.
I think the Olympics, there's the performance element of it, the skill space, the athletes, the sportsmanship, which is what is draws everybody in, right? So there's a sense of hope, and we're very much, as viewers, want to cheer for these individuals who are participating. But at the same time, as anything, there's a double-edged sword, and we really have to be critical of what it is that we're watching. You know, there's a lot of politics involved, especially by, you know, on behalf of or from different nations, different stakeholders that are involved, be it corporations or individuals or political movements that are involved, right? And there's always an agenda, something at this grand of a level that is attracting on a human scale, like a global scale, if we really want to talk about it, in social media, media news, everything that's going on. It really serves as a platform for various stakeholders with varying agendas. It doesn't really matter, be it religious, political, to really use it as a platform to serve their own agenda. And I think that's why, as viewers, we are the ones that they're seeking out. And so I think that is also an element, a different element that to keep in mind. Hopefully we'll discuss a little bit more today.
So, you know, the ideas that Subi brought up of you know, I love how you put it, that reaching that goal, right? Of showing people who work for a span of time to reach that goal. Do you think that has an impact, if not even on a global level, on a community level? And I'm going to let both of you take a stab and come back to you, Subi, Vijay. I mean, you've said that you don't think that there is this sort of really massive benefit to humanity.
I mean, I stand by that. I mean, if you look, for example, in a couple of years when you have the Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, will that have a global impact? I don't know. I don't really see it.
Do you think it has an impact on sort of at a community level with individuals, that whole idea of, you know, reaching your goal?
Absolutely, it will in every host market, and it'll inspire youngsters to take up maybe a certain sport or to aspire to participate in an activity that maybe they otherwise wouldn't because it didn't have the exposure prior to the Olympics. So from that standpoint, I could see that, but as long as there's still inequity and inequalities around the world in terms of access to sports, access to resources to be able to play different sports, then the impact is limited.
Interesting.
And I think another way to look at it is that it's momentary. It's restricted to particular time as well. We talk about the Olympics as being rotational on a 4-year cycle, the Winter Olympic, the Summer Olympics. It's limited to that time. And there was a survey that I was reading. The London Olympics is very much based, especially in the schools, of promoting physical education in the school systems. And they had surveyed the aftermath and asked participants, well, now that you've seen these athletes perform, has it inspired you? And that was the theme, right? Inspire a generation. Has it inspired you to take an active lifestyle, to go out and take up soccer or football, whatever it is, at least on a weekly scale? I think on a grand proportion, well over 60% said, well, no, not really. Like, yeah, we enjoyed watching it, and we got inspired in the moment sitting on our couches or going to the pub and at the bars. But are you going to go up and try to be the next Usain Bolt, right? Is that
or just even go running that day?
Exactly, right? So yeah, it inspires us for a moment, and it's great for kids. And as a teacher, I see how you could integrate these things within the classroom with sporting programs in the summer as well. The Summer Olympics more so than other Olympics, where kids have access to this, and you probably can speak to this more. But we have to often wonder, I mean, how limited is it? It's a hype, it's a fad. It comes for a moment, and then we kind of forget about it, and then we go back to our daily routines, right?
I know you're itching to.
You are.
I just like, it is a fad. I mean, every 4 years, you know, everyone gets glued onto their TVs. They're watching the country's medal counts. Who's winning? Who's leading? Is China up? Are they finally upsetting the U.S.? You know, are they coming up just like how they are in the world? Is that going to be reflected in sport? That's what the mainstream media and commercial viewers are looking at, right? But when you look at what the Olympics is symbolizing in terms of each and individual sport and what the countries have achieved, or the countries' members that are participating in it, is 4 years or 8 years of hard work and dedication and time put in to become, you know, like, for example, the Turkish 1500 meter winners. They, for the first time, they brought home Turkey a track and field gold medal, right? Not just a gold, but a gold and silver, which was a huge accomplishment, not only for their country, but also showing what hard work and dedication can do. So as much as it might be like a mainstream fad and cycle, but at the same time, if you follow certain athletes through Twitter or Facebook, Kobe Bryant put it, right? Like, he put it as saying, right when the Olympics are done, training doesn't stop for these individuals that haven't met their goal, right? They're going back home, they're looking for those facilities, they're looking for those training centers, they're looking for those you know, mentors and trainers to get them prepared to reach their ultimate goal, which is to become an Olympic champion. right?
That's put so well. So are you finding that within, like, even because you in the league itself, the leagues that you run,
Yes.
You come across a lot of young people, men and women.
For sure.
I mean, how are they telling you that the Olympics, London specifically, has impacted them? What are you hearing from them?
London specifically, I think what it maybe retouches in their grassroots is to their core summer games events such as track and field and those type of sports, which unfortunately within our community, the South Asian community, we don't promote well enough within. We don't have our local annual South Asian track meet, so to speak, as we did before. I think when I was growing up, I remember at Birchmount Stadium, we used to have this annual track and field type of event within our community. Now we don't see it existing anymore. So in terms of the Summer Olympics,
You're right, it is actually more leagues and team
Yes.
sports. Yeah, that's interesting.
as opposed to like, track sports or summer specific sports, right?
So you don't notice the,
No, unfortunately, that I would have to agree with it, no.
Shiva, do you want to?
I'm just kind of chiming in on, you were mentioning the South Asian community as well, and I guess it's an immigrant, a diaspora context that we really need to explore in terms of accessibility to these young people. I mean, we are part of a diaspora community, and one of the elements of being immigrants in a new country is to situate ourselves as individuals, priority-wise, of economics, of, building infrastructure, of getting a home, mortgage, these other elements. And I guess parents and unfortunately parents pressure their children towards certain, jobs and careers, which we're all probably a product of an experience in our own passing. And so one of the realities of perhaps having individuals to go out and do that work, it takes a lot of effort and pressure versus team-oriented sports where there's more of a collective solidarity where we could do it together, versus, having a young, let's say, a Tamil boy going out, because it's an initiative and that requires that individual to really pursue it. Not to say that it's not possible, but I think priorities of trying to reestablish just that infrastructure, survival are very
And
different.
trying to get settled and
Yeah,
establish yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it might be things that as second and third generation, as you're having greater associations like this, it'll be coming that might be more prominent. But in its beginnings and its origins, I think there's a different set of priorities of survival.
So there's certain specific cultural things that you've mentioned or that are related more to sort of the immigrant experience, right? The fact that when our parents, grandparents come here, they think, well, we've got to get established, we've got to get settled, get into professional careers, make sure you can pay for everything, and that no one can reroute you. So perhaps athletics doesn't take so there's that aspect. But you mentioned accessibility.
Yes.
Right? Speak about that.
I mean, accessibility is a huge issue on all realms. I mean, if you want, we have beautiful artists in our communities, poetry, art, filmmakers, sports also falls into musicians. These are all beautiful arenas and spaces that all young people, not specifically South Asian or immigrant population, just generally people are drawn to if you're talented. But accessibility in terms of having, just the financial stability to do it, to have support from family, from, to say, hey, do it, right? Or the resiliency to overcome certain stereotypes that are still in our community as well, to deter us from going to the typical jobs that bring in steady income, right? And sometimes it does require us to go against the water and to be like, no, I want to do this. I want to do something perhaps that's on the margins or the fringes. And that requires a little bit of more of a struggle as well, right? And some people are able to do it and other people are not. But there are many people who want to do so many different things, be a musician. I've always dreamed of being a ballerina. I've always dreamed of being this. And we hear about these tales and these dreams, but some of that reality is that our everyday life doesn't perhaps enable it or support it. And sports, unfortunately, in the realm of schools and education and public funding from governments and municipal governments, perhaps support doesn't really falls into the marginalized kind of arena, right? And so I think with immigrant communities, that's also another issue, and that's
so that brings about another point. I keep hearing how, it'd be wonderful to have more South Asians, more Tamil Canadians walk into that Olympic stadium. And my question to you is, why? Why is it important for us to see more South Asians or Tamil Canadians walk into that stadium or stand in that podium? Does it really matter? Anyone want to take a start?
I think it would be great to know that we're capable of dedicating ourselves, whether it be a team sport or an individual sport, to that level of competition and excelling in it to get into the Olympics, to at least compete, right? and having, you know, the maybe I think it was the Sri Lankan team had only 3 athletes represented. There's no South Asians being represented within the Canadian teams as well. So this all ties back into accessibility. I think having lost the bid in 2008 for the for the Summer Olympics was a good thing because it should have put those projects in place that were going to be kicked off when they were bidding for the Olympics into place so they can prepare for the future, but they didn't. So we got away with getting the Pan Am Games. So I think small wins as such as the Pan Am Games and getting new full-size swimming pools such as the one that's being built by UFT Scarborough and other sports and recreational centers hopefully will be maintained after the competition's done within the local communities, the agency boards and commissions within the City of Toronto, and have that as accessibility points for our community to use without, you know, servicing them a huge fee to have access to it, right?
Okay. That's interesting. That is actually a good point, that if you do have something like the Pan Am Games, which is going to take place, that you have these centers that might actually somewhat solve. Accessibility is a huge issue. You can't fully solve that. So, you know, that might help. But that brings me to this other point of just actually even getting the games to Toronto. I mean, this is an issue that matters to our community. We're
Right.
stakeholders in the city. And I just think, I mean, do the benefits outweigh the costs? And the reason is I look at the Montreal 1976 games. The debt on that was paid off in 2010. You were in South Africa for the World Cup. I heard, you might know this better than I do, but I heard that there were massive stadiums that were built there that are barely being used now. So my question to you is, like, if you look at a whole city, if Toronto is to be a whole city, what's in it for us? Like 10 years, are we just saddling the city with debt?
The city will be saddled with debt, yes, actually, there's no mistake about that. I mean, anyone that argues otherwise is out to lunch, so to speak. And that it doesn't matter how much fiscal prudence you exhibit. It's going to happen. It's going to happen regardless. It's just that what is the legacy? What is the after effect going to be? How is it going to benefit your particular city? You're right. I was at some of those stadiums in South Africa, and those were beautiful facilities. However, the case with South Africa was that there was a major lack of foresight and strategic planning, in that when those stadiums were built by the South African Organizing Committee, they were not built with accommodating rugby and cricket in mind. So if you look at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in Durban, for example, it's a magnificent facility, beautiful facility. You cannot fit a cricket pitch in there. And the Durban Rugby Club plays at a stadium right beside that stadium, and that team has no reason to go into the Moses Mabhida Stadium. So it's a lack of foresight, lack of planning is now saddling them with not only a white elephant, but also debt as well. What's the legacy for South Africa? From a tourism standpoint, it's great. Would I go back to Cape Town? Absolutely. It's one of the best cities in the world from a picturesque standpoint and from a tourism standpoint. But any city, regardless of, or any country, needs to look at the games or the World Cup or any major sporting event with a strategic mindset in that what do we want to accomplish, how much can we afford to pay, and what's the lasting effect going to be? Because if it's not going to be something that is sustainable, then it's going to cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars for a long period of time, whereas those millions of dollars could be funneled into something more important.
So what would you say that could be for Toronto? Like, what could the positive implications, if it's done right, what could the positive implications be for Toronto?
I think given the fact that in Toronto, and given the fact that we have a diverse community because it's an affluent, relatively affluent city for the most part, the accessibility and the equality that we've been talking about will be there. Whereas if you're dealing with, for example, Kenya, if they're trying to bid for Summer Olympics, will they be in a position to offer all of their residents a chance to use these facilities? Perhaps not. So it depends, I think, on the level of development within the country and the accessibility to services and facilities and so on. So will those facilities benefit more by being in Toronto than in, say, Nairobi, Kenya? Absolutely, I think, because you have more accessibility, more affluence to be able to pay for the use of these facilities. So you have to look at it from that standpoint, I think, too.
Cities that do compete for bids, you know, can't just be looking forward to competing and just getting the tender, right? Toronto had this great plan put together, and having the mega city transit plan, you know, sped up and put into play. But since they didn't win the bid, all those plans got shelved, right? So a city such as Toronto, especially when you're trying to be a world-leading city, should not be doing that. They should be putting those small plans into action after the fact. So when they do decide to bid again, you know, some of the factors are addressed in their bids, such as transit, accessibility, and so forth, right?
And we should probably update our viewers on this, because this is actually an important fact, that in Toronto, what you were referring to, that in 2008 they had this plan called, I think it was called the Super Build program, and it was going to be this sort of major transit strategy. I heard the viewer who brought this up with me said it was the first time ever. I don't know if it's the first time ever, but they said for the first time ever, you had 3 levels of government who said, we're going to do this.
Right.
The bid fell through, so did the program. So sometimes I wonder, you know, if it takes something like the Olympics or the Pan Am Games to make big infrastructure projects.
And I'm hoping the Pan Am Games does that, right?
Yeah.
Because they're putting a lot of investment and time into the core and getting some of these lacking sports facilities in there, such as a full-size gymnasium, and reaching out to the suburbs as well, whereas, you know, the full-time swimming pools come into Scarborough. And once those centers are set up, hopefully the transportation hubs get, you know, planned around it, so that way accessibility gets addressed
to some degree.
Yeah.
But even the issue becomes that, yes, we could have the Pan Am Games, or we could, you know, Toronto could bid for these things, and we could build all these beautiful stadiums and, you know, present ourselves on a great platform to the world. But the maintenance is the after fact, is a huge issue. With school boards in Toronto, with swimming pools that are being closed, cafeterias, and they just, you know, this requires money, taxpayers' money, to maintain these certain things, right? So even with the Olympics in Montreal, yes, the debt is paid off just recently. And what incurred all the debt, part of it was the maintenance of these buildings and these stadiums that have been built, as you're highlighting as well, right? So what are we going to do with that? And how is it, as a city, we the taxpayers, how is it that we're going to pay off the debt, right? Realistically, we are the individuals who occupy this space, or this beautiful space, and how is those spaces going to be used? We could have beautiful buildings, but they also could be empty buildings after the fact, right? And so what are we going to do with it? And who, and for erecting buildings in certain spaces, we have to also negotiate the fact that people might occupy these spaces as it is. Who is being displaced, right? Who are being moved? I mean, this is
which happened in Beijing.
This was a huge issue. With Rio, the issue is coming up again, where certain articles in the newspaper are discussing certain, I guess, lower end or slum cities that are being, individuals and families are being relocated so they could build up stadiums, right? So again, we're hearing these stories, and viscerally, this is something that will impact us. Olympic family members, you know, tourists will come and go, but at the end of the day, as people of the city, the infrastructure, the transit, yes, we as citizens, you know, people who live in Toronto, we want better transit, right? We love our city and we want those things. But why does it take a big Olympic phenomena, the spectacle, to get what we as citizens, you know, individuals in Toronto should have access to proper transit system, right? So there's that one element, but also the afterward. We rarely ever talk about the after effects of the Olympics. I mean, what's going on in London right now? The Paralympics is going on. I mean, what kind of attention is that getting in London right now? Are we talking about that, right? And if we're not talking about that, what are the implications of that as well, right? So I think there's so much, again, hoopla and for the 10, 12 days of the Olympics. All the news reporters are there, everybody's broadcasting it. But okay, now it's done, what's going on? How much money was it spent? Cost benefit analysis, all these things are important, right? So we also have to, I think, perhaps problematize that as well.
Final word before we go to a break, Vijay?
It's amazing what a re-election time can do.
Yeah.
And that's the disappointing part, though, is
Yes,
when these kinds of grand plans get caught up in all the political posturing, because then, as you mentioned there, once the bid was defeated, then everyone just takes all the plans and throws them off the table.
Right. Yeah.
And then if there's a time for a re-election, then all these promises come back again. Or it's the games, then they come back again. So it's disappointing that that necessary services and infrastructure that's needed for the community gets caught up in re-election times, and only when these major events come up. There's a lack of will to get this done, regardless of those impetuses, so to speak. So from that standpoint, it's disappointing when people can't get access until somebody decides, okay, well, you're going to get it at this time because it fits our agenda.
Yeah. That's a very important angle. And I think it's going to be very interesting as we approach the election cycle to see all of these come up. So we're going to take a break. You're going to stay with us. You're watching Crossroads on TVI. We'll come back to this wonderful panel when you return. Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Salvaraja. We're speaking with Shobha, Subi, and Vijay about the Olympics. Actually, while you folks were enjoying a little bit of a break, they kept the debate going. and Shobha wants to actually add into a discussion we were having earlier, and that's that whole question about why is it important for us to see Tamil Canadians or South Asian Canadians on the podium or walk into the stadium. And you don't think so?
It's not that I don't think so. I think the question really needs to be, why is it important for us to see that representation? I mean, we struggle with it so much. And it really got me thinking with this whole issue that came up with the $100 bill and the, kind of...
And explain perhaps to our viewers.
Well, there was the $100 note that was, I guess, it's a Bank of Canada that they were printing, and they had conducted a focus group. And the initial print was, one of the complaints within the focus group perhaps was that the female scientist that was represented on the back of the bill had qualities that was very closely Asian oriented. And so one of the things that they had done is taken the bill and redone it to make it ethnically neutral, whatever that means, right? And that's a very problematic term that we really need to try to figure out, and especially in country like Canada with huge cosmopolitan centers like Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal. And I was really thinking about it, well, why is it that we as a community, especially a diasporic community, why do we feel the need to see ourselves represented on a podium with the flag and the Canadian national anthem? I mean, it is great, and I want everybody to succeed and do well, right? And that doesn't limit to just our people, but all peoples, right? But I was even wondering, well, what about everybody else? And if they saw a Tamil Canadian person at the podium with the gold medal, and the Canadian national anthem, would they see themselves in that individual who's representing Canada?
If they don't see themselves in the scientist, then why would they see themselves in there?
Yeah. And that's really, for us as a community, yes, we want to make our mark here, right? And we struggle so much as a diaspora community because we, questions of assimilation, of integration, how much, what is multiculturalism? Oh no, we as a Tamil community have arrived, we're doing beautiful things, we're doing these things for Canada, and that's great, but we also shouldn't neglect the fact that yes, we come from this heritage and this legacy that we need to maintain, but at the cost of what, right? At the cost of trying to integrate so much into a Canada. What is Canada? What is multiculturalism? What are we losing? What are we gaining? Mm-hmm. And then we really need to see from everybody else and the beautiful diversity that's there. But across Canada, from east to west, north to south, it's beautifully diverse and eclectic, and so many people there. Well, we see someone who's, Chinese, or someone who's Somalian, Canadian, anybody, not just our community, any diaspora community on that stadium. Do we feel, yes, that Canada, that I'm proud that individual has won a gold medal for us, be they Sri Lankan or Tamil Canadian, be they Indian Canadian or Punjabi Canadian, right? And really, I think that's what needs to be questioned and nuanced. Why is it that we desire that?
Whether we want it so much.
Yeah. To say that we've arrived, that we've made our mark here, right?
Now, you're both athletes, right? Yeah. Yourselves.
Potential.
And you also you participate in a lot of sort of leagues. So I mean, do you feel that the people around you or you yourself are inspired in that way when you might see someone that may not exactly look like you but is Canadian on that podium? And do you think it makes a difference if they do look more like you?
No, not really, to tell you the truth. It doesn't matter to me when I look at someone, whether they're, what color their skin is, to motivate me to compete at what level or to be dedicated to something that I want to achieve individually based on what I see visually. But what I will say is, maybe if Canada had a cricket team, and if cricket was, a part of the Olympics, we would see more Sri Lankans or South Asians taking part in that sport. But back to the whole point of South Asians and potentially a Sri Lankan or an Indian Tamil, being awarded a medal, I think it would be great to see, not just for the country, but for South Asians overall throughout the entire world. Because even India, for example, doesn't do well in the Olympics, and they have
Per capita, yes.
per capita.
Yeah.
It's insane, right? So when you see other countries such as China and the U.S. and even the U.K., for example, they're a bit diverse now, and their medal counts have gone up tremendously in the 2012 Olympics. It would just be great to see that achievement, to say that, you know what, South Asians are legit. We are valid in sports, whether you're Punjabi, Tamil, Sikh, whatever your ethnic nationality is, but any South Asian having some sort
It's
of
like a global thing.
some sort of predominance in a specific sports, whether it be a Michael Phelps or a Kobe Bryant or whoever it may be, someone for our own ethnic blend, we can say that, they've achieved something tremendous, and we can be grateful for that. Right?
And my concern with that comment, and again, I'm just intrigued as someone who, I'm fascinated, because with the Olympics this year, so much was represent like embodiment of the athlete themselves. It became such an issue of ethnicity and such an issue of religion, and everything was embodied in the individual, mapped on the body of the person. So I'm just so curious that as athletes themselves might not personify this, but why is it, it's just the politics of identity, right? So racialization becomes such a key component of it, and like to validate, your ethnicity or your religious identity doesn't validate you as an athlete. It's your performance based, your skills based. And that's why. So it shouldn't matter that you are from this country. It shouldn't matter that, yes, there's pride to it, because as a country, as a nation, there's an ethos, right? You're all like very happy to be behind that person, right? Because they've succeeded and they've done so well. But a lot of it is based on nationalism and nationhood and all these very kind of ambiguous terms that we've created as a society. And for sport, for spectacle, that it's based on pure talent. As an athlete, when you go, you're not asking them, oh, because you're from this ethnicity or this culture
I'm
background.
not good at this because I'm
Just
Tamil. It just happens that I woke up at 5 a.m. every morning and ran.
trained.
Exactly, right? And so that's what I think we need to interrogate, and that's what we need to be a bit more critical of. Again,
Well, I'm sure we're going to get some views on that. So I'm going to move us from that to one other question, which is, I know you've said that and I recognize that, but I'm also curious to hear from there seems to be still some interest in seeing more South Asians, on this panel at least, and seeing more South Asians, more Tamil Canadians at the Olympics. What do you think we could change to make that happen?
I think we have a long way to go to make that change in order to see that happen, because within a community as large as our own, within Toronto, we don't fund our own sporting events. We don't fund our own leagues. Everything's self-funded within within the leagues that we run. So if our own community is not willing to put some money into it, to make it happen, it's just not going to be reality as much as we might want to talk about it, right? We see all these cultural centers going up, Sai Baba centers, temples, mosques. I don't see a community center going up, even with all of them put their monies together, right? So it's unfortunate, the kids want to see this happen. I know that for a fact, because they're always telling me that, I wish there was a gym where we can go to train, where we don't have to pay $50-$60 a month for membership and so forth. So until our community steps up as a whole and decides to invest in our own community, we're far-fetched from that being a reality.
I don't know if you want to add in a...
No, absolutely, and it's interesting you brought up that point, because there's a proposal on the table. I'm not sure if it was quashed, but there was a proposal by an Italian developer in Brampton to build a baseball stadium for the Pan Am Games that would then be refurbished into a cricket stadium,
Awesome.
which would then be capable of holding ICC caliber or International Cricket Council caliber events in Canada. So potentially Canada could then host a major ICC event at some point, and a cricket stadium is badly needed, or a cricket-specific stadium is badly needed in this country. So that's an opportunity there. But I think it's interesting because I'd like to see more South Asians on these various on a Canadian team, but I've always identified myself more as a nationalist than as, say, Indian Canadian. And for me, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, what would happen if India were to play Canada in a soccer match?" And I tell them I'd want Canada to beat India quite badly, because I identify mostly as a nationalist.
Exactly.
I've interviewed and I follow the Canadian men's national soccer team. It's my passion, actually. I've seen them play in the Caribbean. I've seen them play in the United States. And wherever they go, I try to follow them as much as I can within my means. And the fact that there are no South Asians on that team doesn't bother me one bit. I want them to beat the United States. I want them to beat Mexico, any other country that's a rival of ours. And it doesn't matter to me that there are no South Asians or that there never will be any South Asians. So it's different from that standpoint. But I think
if there were, though, would you be a bit more, I guess not satisfied, but
no.
Would you be happy that we
No.
no?
No, I mean, I would be happy from the standpoint that if there were more South Asians or Tamil Canadians on the Canadian national Olympic team, that it would bring more awareness of that culture to people, say, in Red Deer, Alberta, who don't know anything or don't know the difference between South Asian Indian and Indian as a native Indian.
Exactly. Yeah.
So from that standpoint, in terms of building awareness within the larger population, having a South Asian on the Canadian Olympic team would be beneficial. But does it necessarily mean I'm going to follow it more? No.
But if we did have someone, you know, on a national team or at a national level where they're representing a demographic within their own nation, right? I think it will be symbolic for at least sponsorships to be funneled potentially through that individual and reaching back to those communities that he or she might be from, right? So there's other ways of I guess getting these centers established and tapping into them. If we did have someone,
They could be a vanguard
exactly.
of the movement.
Right.
Well, as is typical for every time we have a debate, we're running out of time. So I know there are 2 or 3 more topics. We may have to just take that to Facebook, but thank you so much for coming on. You guys definitely entertained me, and I think the producers too. Yeah. So and we'll have. I know we're going to have you all again. On some time.
Great.
Perhaps when the Pan Am Games are coming up, we'll do this debate and
Let's
we'll go
see
back
how
to
much
the
coverage that gets.
Good point. Good point.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you.
Take care.
That wraps up our show for today. Here are our closing thoughts for today. All of this talk of athletics and the Olympics makes us all feel like getting active. Well, have you tried Kalitattu? It's an old game rooted in our agricultural history that requires very little gear, just some quick thinking and running. I've played it before at picnics and it is a tremendous amount of fun. I mean, I've had actually my aunts and uncles' parents beat me at it, so this is open to anyone. If you'd like to try it out, here's your chance. TYO Canada, the Tamil Youth Organization Canada, is holding a Kalitattu tournament next Sunday, August the 26th, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. at Ali Abbas Park in Scarborough, Ontario. There'll be over 20 teams, even beginner ones. You can register beforehand or sign up with your team that day. For more information, please call them at 647-947-5072. I think it'd be a beautiful way to kind of close off what has been a kind of rainy summer. So that wraps up our show for today. Thank you all for joining us. You've been watching Crossroads on TVI with Manjula Savraja.
தரணியில் தமிழரின் பிம்பம் உங்கள் டிவி.